Welcome to Worth Your Time with your hosts from the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom Show, Kristi Lee, and the president and CEO of the Indianapolis Zoo, Dr. Rob Shumaker. Our mission to inform, entertain, and educate with guests from all aspects of life. We guarantee there isn't another podcast that features two hosts with such different backgrounds and discussions with remarkable people doing exceptional things. So let's get started. Here are your hosts, Kristi Lee and Dr. Rob Shumaker.
How are you, Kristi?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm great.
You caught me a little off guard.
That's my plan.
Yeah.
I'm great. Good to see you as always. And I am so excited for the second half of our conversation with Mel Raines. Mel Raines is the CEO of Pacers Sports and Entertainment. And if you haven't listened to the first episode with Mel Raines, it's probably a great idea to do that because there's a great sequence to your career. And the stories are remarkable about this very, and as you describe it, a very unusual path to get to where you are today. Fair enough, right?
True, yes.
Good.
You can do anything with a liberal arts degree from IU.
Where we left off is, and you have to explain how this happened, you found your way to working on the Super Bowl, the most recent Super Bowl that was held in Indianapolis.
2012.
I did. So
how did that happen?
I had seen in the news, of course, that we bid and won the Super Bowl. I think it was in May of 2008 is when that was announced. And so I'd followed that news. And at the time I was working on the Republican convention in Minneapolis. And so I had inquired with a couple of friends back in Indy if they had any details or how that may work. And so I knew Allison Millington was going to be running it. And Jack Swarbrick at the time, that was before he became the Notre Dame athletic director, was probably going to be a senior person involved too. And I knew Jack a little bit. I didn't know Allison at all. So I think I connected and met her for coffee that Christmas and get a sense of when are you going to post for jobs and introduce myself. And then in the spring, she posted, and I picked one that I thought was probably the best fit. It's ended up being a slightly different job than that, but I applied with, I think, 150 other people. Like, turned in my application and interviewed by phone in the summer, and then they flew me out for a second interview. But yeah, I was I hadn't had a real interview in a long time. I was pretty nervous. I guess the last interview I had was with Dick Cheney, so that was pretty much baked by the time I walked in the office.
See, that's why you have to listen to episode 1. You were done working on the Republican National Convention. What was your position at that time? Because you'd worked on several conventions, right?
I ended up working on 6 total. But at that time, I was doing political consulting, actually, for Mary Cheney, who's Vice President Cheney's daughter. She had a practice in a firm, and we were friends, and I was working for her, and she's great. And it wasn't that so much as I was just ready to come home, ready to come back to Indiana. So Allison saved me. I owe all of this to Allison Millington.
I owe a lot of my career to Allison Millington, too. She's a wonderful woman as well.
Is.
We'll have to get her on the podcast
That'd
at another
great.
time. But you went from running conventions to putting on a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Is there compare and contrast?
And what are you applying for when there's a job to
There's so much.
run this? What did you apply for?
I applied for, I think it was Vice President of Operations was what the title was. It ended up being Government Relations, and she gave me that for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. It was, so listen, I tell this to young people who are like, this is the most amazing thing, and I want to do that too. I took a massive pay cut and a pretty significant step backwards to do the job because I was changing industries, and I didn't think I really could dictate the term. So when my last job in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I was the COO of the convention. I had 125 person staff. I had a driver and an assistant, and I was working at 18 hours a day or something. When I started with Allison, I was staffer number 4. I was in a cubicle in a building by the stadium that they had used to renovate, to build it. So the construction offices were there, and they were winding up, and we were moving in. And I would wear my winter coat every day because I was in this big open area and it was too cold to type. And I was booking Mayor Ballard's tickets to go to the 2010 Super Bowl and typing out a schedule like I was back on Capitol Hill on my first job. And it was, let's get that skill set back together. Nobody's doing this for you. You have to do it for other people and build your resume back up. It was great. I was happy to do it, but I think a lot of people think your career is the linear, and it's not necessarily, especially when you want to make that kind of change.
So is that I think amazing and such great advice. But I'm interested to know about you. What allowed you to do that? Because there's a lot of people that I think psychologically could not do that. Was it humility or confidence, or what is it that let you go back to a position where you felt you'd regress 20 years professionally? That's fair, right?
Yeah, no, it's fair. Maybe more like 10 or 12. But I think I'm just wired that way. It doesn't really bother me. I knew I needed to. The secret to my career has been nothing but hard work. It's nothing but putting your head down and literally doing the work.
That's a huge message for everybody listening.
I haven't found a magic powder to put in my drink every day, and I get to avoid all of that and still get the paycheck and all the other things. And so for me, it was roll up your sleeves. I've got to reconnect in the state that I was born in. I've never worked professionally here. My last paycheck from the state of Indiana was at Pizza Hut in Bloomington, without exaggeration, when I was in college. And so I've got
when Pizza Hut had menus.
Yeah. I was at the delivery takeout store. And so I've got to meet everybody. I've got to be humble about it. I have a job a lot of people wanted, so I better be darn good at it, because a lot of people didn't get it who were qualified and who were living here. And we better do this really well. This is really important for the city and the state, that we deliver on this promise that I didn't make, but I can read the bid specs, and this is no small amount of work. So I felt really committed to the mission from the beginning, and just prided being a Hoosier and understanding we've had Pan Am games and other things, but nothing this big in a long time. And this would set the stage for all these other things that have happened subsequently. So you could get that sense right away, and just how everybody was all in. But I think I don't know, I guess I'm wired that way. I don't think I walk around generally every day, and maybe I'll grow into this, but I don't feel like I walk around like I'm the CEO of an NBA, WNBA. Like, that's just not my jam. I roll up my sleeves like everybody else on our team. If something's going on, for putting out T-shirts for a gold out at a playoff game, I'm putting out T-shirts for the gold out too. So I just think it fit in with who I am anyway.
I know you won't say this, but I think it takes an extraordinary amount of courage to do that. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
I think there's no disrespect to the hard work. I love that comment, and I hope that's the clip. That's the clip we need to use on TikTok. That's like the stellar moment. But I think you got to have unbelievable courage to make that kind of change. I admire it.
I
think
also
it's incredible.
think there's a lot of self-confidence that comes along with doing something like that, and I think you come off to me as a kind of a person that went, if this doesn't work out, I'll find something else. I'm not worried about it, because I know I'll find something. I know something else is out there, which I think is a very comfortable position to feel. And courage, yes, but hail to the self-confidence that you have and portray, because a lot of people don't have that.
Know your
great.
value.
Thanks.
You know your value, right?
Yeah. Yes, I think. And I also, like I said, I knew that my worst case is I load up my car and I go back to DC, and I've made a lot of contacts, and I can do that if I have to. Not what I wanted to do, but I could do it if I had to. It's actually what I ended up doing.
Oh,
for
did
2
you go,
years after
Really?
I worked for
after,
Susan.
You went back after the Super Bowl to work for Susan Brooks?
I did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was her. She was running in 12. It was her would be her freshman term, so I worked for her freshman term.
And you solicited the job, or you got recruited? Or?
We got to know each other. She was a volunteer chair for the Super Bowl. So many of our great community leaders. And when she decided to run, she had to step back from that since we were a nonprofit. But I had gotten to know her. I was super excited that she may win, and supported her campaign like a lot of women in town. And
she's another great, strong woman. That's really amazing.
She's phenomenal. And so she won. When she won the primary, it was pretty apparent she probably won the general election. So over the course of that summer, we met a couple times, and you can't hire someone until you actually win. But we knew if she won, I had a good sense that she would want me to come and be her chief of staff. And it was a good bridge, because I had one foot in Indy. I was here all the time, came back often. I lived in DC when I was doing that for her, but it was doing something I knew how to do, I think, for someone I really respected and liked working for, learned a lot from, and then kept my connections here. So when the right thing came, I just didn't find the right thing right after the Super Bowl, unfortunately, but I knew it would come.
And what was the right thing?
wound up being this. At least it's the longest I've ever worked anywhere at Pacer Sports Entertainment.
And what did you start? In what position did you start?
Wait, and how did that happen? Because I had the same thing. I thought it was from the Super Bowl to Pacers, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. No.
That she met. I bet it was through Rick Fusion, probably.
Yeah, it was Rick. So I knew Rick from the Super Bowl. Okay. I didn't work super closely with him, but closely enough. Yep, my predecessor. Yeah. And I was back in town working for Susan during August recess, and I was having lunch with a former colleague from the Super Bowl who was working there. And I hadn't seen Rick in a while, and I would run into him socially. And I emailed his assistant, who's now my assistant, and said, hey, I'm going to be in the building having lunch. Does he have 5 minutes? I'd love to say hi. And that was part of my job, right? Keep in touch with everybody who's back in town. And we sat down, and Rick is just Mr. Shoot from the hip. And he said, what do you do? How do you like this? What do you do? And I said, I love working for Susan. I'm going to get her through her first term, and I'm going to see. We'll see if she wants me to stay. I'd like to rather be back here. And he said, I may have something for you. Let's stay in touch. And I said, okay. I never thought about working there, but great. And then a couple months later, I was back for the election. We got together, and he said, I think you'd be good running this building. What do you think? And I said, I think I've never run an NBA arena before, but let's talk about it. I've been a client in them. And so, we just started talking about it, and in only a way Rick would do. No job description, didn't ask for my resume, none of the normal things. And he saw something in me I don't think I saw in myself. And it took a lot more work for him to hire someone who had not been in that business, because he had to teach me a lot.
Work to actually hire you, or work once you were hired?
Once I was hired.
Once you were hired, okay.
Yeah. But it fit. Obviously, it fit. 10 years later, I'm still here.
Do you think he knew even then that you might one day sit in his chair?
That's a good question. I've not asked him that. I think over time he had hope, certainly, and he kept giving me more responsibility so that I think I would be in a good position to do it one day. But I don't think on day one he probably would have thought that. But I don't think he was in his early 60s then, and I don't know that was even on his horizon yet. Who on the team was he grooming to be the next person? And there's several good candidates, I think, there.
Oh, it's a great place. Yeah. We're talking about Pacers Sports and Entertainment. If you're just joining us, or if you are not familiar with Mel Raines and what she does, one of 6 women in an executive position now in the NBA, which is just incredible. Yeah. As another woman who's in a male-dominated field and have been even longer than you have, because I'm older, way older, have you run up against opposition?
I don't know that it's been opposition, but certainly you have to work to, when you're the only woman in the room a lot, I think to...
You're the only female CEO in the NBA?
No, I am not. I think there are 5 right now. One just retired. So there are 5. But what's interesting about the NBA is they're all a little bit different. So because
the titles seem different when I...
Yeah. They are different. And so it depends. Like, not many have a WNBA and an NBA team and run the arena.
So can I ask you to take just a second because there's a lot of people that may not be familiar with Pacers Sports and Entertainment.
I can't believe that, but okay. I'm
sorry I had to say
premise.
it.
Okay.
I'm sorry I had to say it. And I'm probably wrong, but let's just say, so includes...
the Indiana Pacers, the Indiana men's basketball NBA team, who just played in Paris for 2 games, for those of you in France.
France.
WNBA Indiana Fever, women's basketball team, Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So I was in a meeting before I came over, the 54th busiest arena in the world last year for music business.
It's a massive facility.
Yes, a lot going on. We have a minor league, or what's called the G League men's team in the Mad Ants that players get groomed to move into the NBA Pacers team. And then we have a charitable foundation as well. I feel like I'm missing other things. Hosting the WNBA All-Star Game this summer. So lots of different projects going on.
And when you say sports and entertainment, the entertainment is primarily but not exclusively music venue?
Yes, but we just finished a Disney on Ice run with 55,000 people in the building over the weekend. So I would say it's everything from professional bull riding to concerts to we do about 400 meetings and events a year that are not ticketed. So the Peyton Manning Children's Hospital galas and 3 weeks, those kinds of things as well. So we have something almost every day of the year in the building.
Thank you. I think
That
that's
is
super.
incredible.
Yeah. So it's over. So
You have great tickets.
Yeah. I'm over the business side of the men's team, not the basketball side. Kevin Pritchard is our president of basketball operations. No one asks me who to draft or what I think about.
You're not,
the trade deadline does not make me busy.
You are not in the room during the draft.
Well,
You are.
I stop by sometimes and say hi and see how it's going when it's not our pick or something, and just to learn a little bit. But no, nobody's asking me my opinion about the basketball team, nor should they. That's not my job.
What about the Fever side?
So on the Fever side, Kelly Krauskopf does report to me. She is a brilliant basketball mind and brought in Amber Cox recently as our new GM and COO. So I confer with them a little bit, but ultimately defer to their basketball expertise. The business side also reports up through me. And then the Fieldhouse, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, all of that reports up to me directly.
Because that was your baby to begin with, right?
Yeah, she really is my baby. Yeah.
So when you talk about the business side of basketball, men's or women's team, what does that mean?
So think of sales, ticket sales, marketing, sponsorships, all of our data, customer insights and engagement. Digital has grown dramatically in the 10 years I've been with the company. Us being able to tell our story to our fans and ultimately monetize that is what everybody's looking to do. Certainly HR, IT, finance, legal, the facilities. So everything in facilities is security and food and beverage, guest experience, ushers, all of our part-time staff. I think we have about 1,500 part-time staff. So it's all of those various functions that support the basketball
business.
It is a
massive
big
business.
Yeah, it's about 375 employees.
Man, how many employees do you have, Dr. Rob?
At our busiest, you thought you were going to catch me on that one. At our busiest time of the year, about 550.
Wow,
It's a
okay.
lot.
So
It's a
you
lot.
do a very similar job.
Huge.
Yeah.
I've heard you say that you're in charge of, at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, guest experience, the fan experience, but are you also in charge of the player experience in any way?
Yes and no. We take the basketball department's direction on that. So, for instance, we recently renovated the area outside the locker room on the player path of travel from the locker room out to the floor to make that kind of a more exciting thing. When I first got there, it was cinder block walls, like you were in jail, and it was not. And we've come a long way since then. But those kinds of things are more and more important, not just to have a better digital background, but really to get the players excited as they're running out to the floor for the beginning of the game or after halftime. So we take the lead of what basketball wants to do in those cases, but also try to follow what other teams are doing and best practices and make it, I mean, to me, it's the artist experience. So when Pink comes and she's touring with her kids and we set up the Fever Fun Zone on the practice court for them to have a play day. And if that helps us get another date, great. So we're looking at what is a bespoke thing for that tour. Some of them are basketball players and they really want to play basketball. And could we have one of our players stop by? Would they maybe want to? When Adam Sandler was here, he loves basketball. He went over to the Pacers practice facility and some of the people wanted to meet him, and that was cool for them and cool for him. We try to look at those things from the artist perspective, the guest perspective, and certainly the player perspective.
Fantastic.
Yeah. We can't let you get out of here without talking about Caitlin Clark, obviously, because she has changed women's basketball. In a nutshell, explain the last year and what it has done for the Pacers organization and the Fever organization.
And can I ask, do you agree with that? Do you think that's, because we didn't talk about it ahead of time. Is that how you would characterize it? I'm curious.
I certainly think she has contributed a huge amount to that. I think there's a number of factors that made this last class of rookies help raise the profile of the league writ large. And Caitlin was certainly the highest profile of those players, but their Angel Reese and Cameron Brink and others came with a huge following. And some of that I think is ascribed to NIL. And so on the women's side, name, image, likeness at the college level, where you can now monetize as a player your jersey, have sponsors. It used to be just an absolute no, you can't make $5 on anything. And now basically you're your own brand in college. And on the women's side, they can't be drafted until they've played 3 years minimum, but most go all 4 years in college. And on the men's side, it's 1 year. And so if you think about having 3 years or 4 years in most cases to build a brand and now monetize it like Caitlin and Angel Reese and others were able to do. When you come out, you're coming with a huge number of fans. And most of the men are, when they're 19, they're coming out. A lot are also from other parts of the world. And so that movement at one time coming into the league this year certainly changed all of the dynamics.
I never thought about that. That's very interesting because I watched more women's college basketball last year than I'd ever, year before, 2023, than I'd ever watched. Yeah. And I know it's because of that, because I had it in front of me that I didn't expect to see, or, oh yeah, I want to check that out. Or
the women's Final Four had more viewers in 24 than the men's, which had never happened before. Wow. They were bringing that. All those players, Aaliyah Boston the year before, all of that is coming with them. And so it's certainly shined a brighter light, I think, on the league as a whole.
But you also pointed out something really interesting is that, and I'm amazed you characterized it this way. Obviously, it's accurate, but I had never heard anyone say it, that you said the WNBA is in its infancy.
It is. It's 50
Doesn't that
years.
surprise you to hear?
It's 50 years younger than the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, it is very young, really.
I don't think most people think that.
Right.
They
and
think, it's major league, whatever.
If you think of what the NBA was in 1975, that would be comparable to what the WNBA is now. Now I think they're growing in leaps and bounds more quickly than
NBA
that.
Or
WNBA certainly is going to catch up to that 50-year difference a lot faster. But it is still, it's a newer league, and this was certainly the most successful year they've had probably since the year that they launched.
So when you say catch up, can you characterize what you mean catch up? In what ways?
Sure. I think in every way. When you think of what a sports business is and what it's built on, and the foundation is a television deal. And the WNBA just negotiated a fantastic new national television deal. So it's a lot of things start with that, as the NBA just did, renegotiated theirs. So that's a new, much bigger deal. Ticket sales, sponsorships. We have sponsors coming to us to sponsor the Fever that don't sponsor the Pacers. That was not the case, very rarely the case before. They're usually coming in for the Pacers and they're adding on some Fever. But when you think about just the eyes on that team, it's just dramatically different. How we support that team, whether that's security, player development, all of the new, it's in every way turning into an NBA team really quickly. And it's exciting to see, and it's what the women deserve. And certainly the Simon family has been behind this for a long time.
You have to say who the Simon family is in relation to all.
Herb and Mel Simon purchased the Indiana Pacers in 1983. Mel Simon passed away about 15 years ago, I believe. And Herb Simon is the owner of the team now, and his family. And so longest standing owner in NBA history, bought the Fever 25 years ago. So it will be in our 26th season when he started it. And what I've told people, and he'll never take credit, so he'll never say this, but the hero in this story of last summer and future Fever seasons is Herb Simon. He could have many times was told, or you should fold this team, or a lot of other NBA teams that had these franchises folded them over time, didn't sell them, didn't do anything, but just got rid of them because they weren't making money. And he was invested in this game. He thought it was important for our community to have this team. He believed in women's basketball. And if he hadn't done that, this last summer that we had, this record-breaking summer, and what I think is to come, we wouldn't have a team. And so he's the unsung hero of this story, in my opinion, and his family.
And he's 90?
He is. Yeah. He's the youngest 90 you'll ever meet. I cannot keep up with Herb Simon. I do my best, but he runs circles around me.
And isn't it fantastic for him that in his 90th year he sees a season like you just had?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was so fun to see it through he was more excited about those games than almost anybody else.
And then you announced that the new $78 million facility for the Fever is going to go up and should be operational in 2027. How exciting is that?
They're going to have a podcast studio in there.
I know. Maybe we'll be guests.
Exactly.
I'll start a podcast and I will have you as my guest.
There you go.
That's exactly right.
And
Yeah.
apparently you will be able to get your nails done at the same time.
Yeah,
I
which
read
is
that. You have a nail
Exactly.
salon.
I think you have to be on the team to get your nails done. So
Oh,
you're gonna have
no.
you have to practice a little bit more. Yeah.
I'm 5 feet. I'm not going to be playing basketball.
Yeah.
Were you a basketball player?
I was, yeah. I'm 5'9", and I was 5'9" in the 7th grade, and I grew up in Indiana, so I think by law I had to play basketball.
True.
I was never going to play at an advanced level, but I did play.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this facility is going to really change things for women's sports as a whole here, I think, in central Indiana as well as nationwide. I don't know how many other WNBA teams have their own
Just
practice
what I was thinking.
facility.
Is that a first?
4 or
No,
5,
we're not the
maybe?
first, but there's not even half are there. So
Yeah.
I think it's 4 maybe. And our facilities, first of all, I want to point out, we were one of the only teams to always have dedicated facilities for the team since they started in 1999. We have always had a dedicated locker room. It's not something we flipped and let a show go in, or they've always had dedicated training facilities, and we upgraded those in 2020 when we renovated with a dedicated court, and they're very good. But it is clear that with the growth of the league and that we needed to have a standalone, bigger facility. And what's also fascinating as I've been digging into it more, Kelly Krauskopf is helping lead the design, and Populous is our architecture firm, and they've done a lot in this space, and a lot of research is that there really aren't many purpose-built for women training facilities, and women and men are not the same. It's not the same weight room. It's not just building something that is going to be exactly the same. They're, especially most professional female athletes at that age, they have monthly physical changes that affect their performance. Sure. That there are things that they need that are different. And now I think today's athletes also, when you're thinking of mental health and wellness and recovery and those things, all of those things are just so much different than they were even 20 years ago, how people think about those things. And then the other wraparound services, a female athlete is going to spend more time on how they look in the mirror and all those other things.
Childcare.
That's huge.
Oh, what is the childcare part of this new facility? Incredible.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Bringing your child when you're coming to practice and having a place there. Think of what that takes off your mind when you're trying to be at your top performance. And so being able to have these in one location that they can feel like is their home is really important, because we want them focused on obviously being the best athletes they can be, and taking some of that burden off of them was amazing. So,
and it's great for recruiting and drafting people.
Absolutely.
Look what we offer you.
And then also it just has the added benefit of being the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, the Simon family and Stephen Rails, who is Herb's partner and has 20% of the teams, they are so invested in this, and they are so excited for it. They're all in, which is great. And it's part of the hope that we're the epicenter of women's sports by 2050. This is part of the Sports Corp's, our local sports commission's stated goal, one of their strategic pillars. And I think we, Pacer Sports Entertainment and the Fever, have to play a central role in trying to achieve that. We just do.
We have volleyball now, professional
huge.
volleyball, which
Yeah,
is
huge.
huge.
I'm going to try to go to a game next week. I'm excited to see it.
I'm excited to go too. And I didn't even know professional women's volleyball existed until that started a couple of weeks ago.
That's great.
Yeah, that's one other example. And they sold out their very first couple of games. So,
And I forget that volleyball is not as big in some parts of the country as it is here in Indiana, but what an incredible spectator sport. Oh my gosh, it's fantastic.
I was at the Olympics as a fan last summer, and I went to a women's volleyball game. We had tickets, and you have to be careful. The balls come flying out of when they spike it. I saw a guy get his glasses knocked off his head who wasn't paying attention. I thought, I am not going to turn my head from this action. I'm going to get hit. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing. MK Hughes is leading that team. She's a phenomenal leader. Jim Shumaker is super invested in it,
relation.
and but 1 degree of separation.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but I think what they've poured into this, it's a true passion project, what they're doing.
what other women's sports are headed this way? Do you know?
I don't know, but I will say just in the world of sports, certainly the NWSL, women's soccer is growing. There's talk of lacrosse, women's lacrosse. Women's rugby after the Olympics has become super popular, and there's a lot of investment in that. So I think the sky is the limit. I know the Colts and the Ursays are working on women's or girls flag football at the high school level, and I think that's headed to as an Olympic sport. So there's a lot. And what Lili Ling is doing at USA Gymnastics, and I know that's a men's and a women's sport, but certainly the women's side of that is much more prominent and popular than the men's side. And she's growing what that looks like and in terms of what their footprint is. And I think there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, I was very involved with USA Gymnastics for a long time here in central Indiana and all over the world, the World Championships. And that's how I got involved with some of the big events like you did with Allison and some of those people. But it's really exciting and wonderful that in my lifetime, I get to see this happening because I never thought I would get to see women's professional basketball team. I never thought that. I never, even working in the NBA at one point, it just didn't cross my mind. Yeah. So congratulations to you. It's a huge thing, and I'm so supportive, and I know a lot of people are. And the Caitlin Clark thing, the phenomenon that she has brought, and the pressure, though, that has to be around her right now. Do you see any of that?
She's just a remarkable young woman. She just has shown such grace through what would be like for anyone. You're playing in the Final Four, and 1 month later, you are in your first preseason game in the WNBA. There's not a lot of time there, and certainly no time to rest. And then you're also in the middle of any number of people want to throw you into any number of controversial topics on a regular basis. And I just think she has navigated that so incredibly well and represented the franchise so well. Really, I think took not making the Olympic team, took it as a chip on her shoulder to get better and lead the team, and which is exactly what happened after the break and got us into our first playoffs in 8 years. And so I often think of what I was like at 22 or 23. I think she just turned 23 a week ago, and I could barely pay my power bill, and I ate macaroni and cheese, and I don't even know how I got to work some days. And I look at this young woman, and I think that she's gonna do some amazing things in her life. I think on the court, but also off the court. I think she's gonna be remarkable.
Which leads us to the 2025 Women's All-Star Game. The WNBA All-Star Game is coming to Indianapolis July 19th. And when you put on an event like that, because you did the 2024 NBA All-Star, you only have a few months to put this together. Is that something that worries you, or?
We had 7 years to do the NBA All-Star Game because of COVID. I didn't need 7. I maybe could use more than 11 months to do the W, but because they're so close together, we had a really good, I think, framework of how committees could work. Some core staff that we could keep on. Susan Boffman, I know you've worked with many times, is come on to help us. Ebony Armstrong, who worked on NBA, Diana Boyce, and others. So we've got a good amount of continuity. But what's important is it's a different event, just like they're different leagues. It's a different kind of weekend. There are different accompanying events. And we need to make sure that it feels just like the NBA All-Star Game for our community, and it's just as impactful with legacy projects and community engagement. And so we're really working to make sure that those are just as good, if not better, as they were for NBA All-Star. And then there are fewer ticketed opportunities. Unfortunately, there's just the 2 nights, and they're in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, which we're excited to host. But there were 7 ticketed opportunities at NBA All-Star Weekend. They just do a different number of events. And so we need to make sure that we're building up downtown. If you want to come downtown and be a part of it, you don't have to get in the Fieldhouse. You will have an opportunity to dribble a basketball and be a part of something fun in downtown Indianapolis. And so we're really focused on that. And in some cases, you've both managed huge projects and organizations. Sometimes it's better when you have less time because we're not spending 4 months planning. We're like, it's time for the rubber to hit the road. We raised the money quickly. The community immediately saw the opportunity, which was great. A lot of our partners stepped right up. And so I'm not concerned that it's not going to be a fantastic event. Sometimes I would set something aside that was just giving me a headache, and I'd say, I'll look at that in a couple months. NBA All-Star, it's 2022. I've got time. Now I've got a countdown clock. I have 26 weeks. I have no time. Everything has to move that day.
Do you use a timeline? Do you use a big whiteboard or?
No, I've never been a whiteboard person, but I work backward. Everything I do, I work backwards. So July 19th is when the game is. a lot of apparel is a 6-month lead time. Better have already ordered it because it's almost February. So I work backwards on projects is typically how I get there. But I'm not and I also don't do binders. A lot of event people do binders.
Binders either.
I'm a little disorganized that way, but I have a sort of
Can you still
photographic
buy
memories.
binders?
What are you talking about? I got a binder
Totally.
for the capital campaign.
Not from me.
From somebody in
I
your
am not a binder
organization.
guy.
Yeah, it's not my thing. But I typically, if I write it down, I can usually remember it. That's how I do it.
And a big shout out to the volunteers in Central Indiana too.
Oh my
Don't you
gosh.
think?
They're the secret sauce, 100%. I mean, I never worry that we're not going to have the best people who want to step forward and make it even better than I could have imagined. Absolutely. And for us, for NBA All-Star, they were standing outside in the snow for 3 days.
Absolutely.
Making that special for people who came from out of town.
The weather was punishing.
It was great for indoor basketball. It was not great when you were going between indoor basketball venues. But so we're excited. Frankly, we don't do a lot of events, these kinds of events that aren't in the winter or very early spring, like Big Ten basketball, where you're not sure. You could get 55 and sunny, but you could still be getting snow. So to do something in July is a really rare opportunity for us. And I think I'm excited to buy more sunscreen than shovels this time. Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
I want to pivot. You okay if I pivot for a minute?
Yeah, please.
I want to pivot because this has been an incredible conversation over 2 different episodes. But I want to pivot back to you and ask about you. What I think is remarkable is that you have been witness and present and participating with some of the most powerful leaders in our country in the course of your career. It's not really an opinion. That's true, right?
So, yeah, in some pockets. Yeah.
The White House is a pretty good barometer of power.
Sure.
And now you are one of the most important leaders in professional sports. Again, not really an opinion. That's just a fact. You're nodding.
I'll take your premise. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, I want to sleep again, so don't stress me out too much.
But here's where I'm trying to go. There has got to be some great leadership lesson for you or some thoughts as a CEO, because there's many books on how to be a successful CEO and most of them aren't worth much. But right from your experience, you must have some incredible thoughts on what it is to be a successful CEO. You've seen some of the best.
Yeah, I've certainly been lucky to see some amazing leaders. And I think one of the hardest things I think for people is to recognize the difference between being a manager and being a leader. And those are incredibly different things. I don't think you can be a good leader if you're not a decent manager. I think you have to have some foundational pieces there. I think you can be a really good manager and not be a leader at all. And how you combine those things, to me, I like to make personal connections with people. And as much as I can, if I'm going to ask you to run through the wall behind me, you better trust me. You better have really high integrity. I better provide you with a vision that you agree with, whatever that may be, whether that's a project or a higher arching thing. And so I've seen leaders that are, it's hard to connect with a president, right? I worked at the pleasure of President Bush, but certainly worked more directly with Vice President Cheney. And yeah, I would have run through the wall with him, and for him certainly, and probably did a couple times. Yeah, I have a few bruises from that time. But I think you'd have to maybe ask my team what that is. But I think I've had the ability to work for some really great leaders over time, and I've tried to absorb what those things are. I think we all learn more from the bad ones than the good ones. What didn't inspire you, what didn't motivate you. And when you're working for someone who's really good, you don't even think about it because they're really good. And you just follow, right? You follow, you're inspired. I'm trying to rebuild our strategic plan. We haven't done that and really dust that off in a while and see where it resonates. I think young people really need that today. I think they matter, what your core values are. When I'm faced with a difficult decision, what are our core values? This should be really simple if I'm embracing those correctly as a company at a time when I think our country's barometer changes like a speedboat with a drunken driver half the time. And so what is our
Good
true
analogy.
what's our true north? And if I'm leading toward that and everybody sees it, I think I'm probably a pretty good leader. And so that's what I'm trying to make sure that it's like, what did they say about the Supreme Court said? Like, I know it when I see it, indecent behavior, whatever, indecent exposure.
That was about pornography.
Pornography. I think hopefully if I'm getting it right, they know it when they see it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm 6 months into this.
Yeah.
And it's a cultural change too. It's generational shift. My predecessor was fantastic as a baby boomer through and through. I'm Gen X, sort of different way. And I'm trying to inspire people who are in their 20s or alphas or gen, whatever they're calling them now. And the ones below them. And our fans are all of it.
Yeah.
Our fans are the greatest generation, and our guests down to kids who were there for Disney on Ice, and thinking about all of those things and trying to tie something together that everybody can really feel they contribute to. It's an interesting company. We have the most talented plumber, I think, in town, who's fantastic. What motivates Darren and what motivates our new 22-year-old group ticket salesperson for the Fever, right? And that they both feel equally vested in this company and what we're doing and what the Simons stand for and this community is kind of what I'm trying to figure out.
So what's your true north?
My personal true north?
How about both, personal and professional?
I mean, I think they are. Certainly for me, I think integrity is incredibly important. I don't know anybody who's going to trust me as a leader if I don't have a heck of a lot of integrity. I'm not cursing on your podcast. And I think if you believe that, and I'm telling you the truth on a regular basis, and that doesn't always mean I'm telling you what you want to hear, unfortunately. And I think you've got to be okay as a leader that you're not always going to be loved, but you're going to be trusted, and that people believe you know that you're doing the right thing for the organization. And that can be hard sometimes if you're willing to take those knocks. I've learned in the last few months, I didn't understand this saying truly, but it's lonely at the top. You know this, you run an organization, you've been in this position. It can be hard some days. You've ultimately got to make the decision, and it might not be popular.
Personal true north? Is it different?
I don't think it's different. That, to me, that's core to who I am. I don't have hopefully nobody thinks I don't have versions of the truth. And I think that's just part of integrity and honesty. And at the end of the day, we should be having fun. We're a sports entertainment company. It doesn't mean it's fun all the time. It doesn't mean everything goes perfectly. But if we're doing our jobs well, people are spending their money that they don't have to spend. We're not selling groceries. Their discretionary income to enjoy themselves with their friends and family. We should be delivering an excellent experience every time. And we should be enjoying that while we're doing it most of the time, if we're doing it right. So hopefully I'm leading in that direction.
I was going to pivot and wrap this up with just something fun. What do you do for fun, Mel?
Every Saturday morning with two of my best friends, we do Pilates.
That's good.
Yeah, I would say I'm the least talented Pilates person in the world, the least flexible person in the world. So that is a challenge for our instructor, who is a saint. I am a terrible cook, but I like to try. And I've got game night with some girlfriends in a couple weeks. And I enjoy spending time with friends and family like everybody else. Yeah, getting away.
It doesn't seem like you have much time off.
I don't get to do it as often as I like, but I think that means it's more meaningful when you do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure having you as our guest.
Man, fantastic.
Yes, and you're an inspiration to women everywhere. Thank you. Or what?
Sorry, now I'm gonna go back to something I heard you say.
Oh no.
I heard you say that you hope the fact that all of the attention that you are a woman CEO in the NBA, you hope that the woman part is a footnote.
I do. And I think if I do it correctly, I won't be the last for our company. Certainly, I'm not the first in the league, but that it didn't matter. She was great at that job, leading that company in our community, which I think is an important community asset, as is the zoo, Indianapolis Zoo and Children's Museum, and all these other institutions, is part of what makes us who we are. And that she was really good at it. And it's just the she is just because she was a woman. She was as good as any man would have done it.
I mean, Kristi, I totally agree with you. But I will say one of the things that amazed me is how often I've heard people say about you, I think she is just going to be an inspiration for my daughter. Yeah, that's certainly true. But what I think and what I want to hear people say, she's going to be an inspiration for my kid. I don't care if it's a son or a daughter.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's fair.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that would be good.
You're just as much my kids are in college, but you're just as much an inspiration for my son as you are for my daughter.
Yeah, I didn't mean to single her out.
Oh, I don't mean it
feel
a bad thing.
No, I feel bad.
I admire your perspective.
Yeah. Yes,
I think
thanks.
back to it, I think it's another example of a really courageous statement to say, this is about my performance. Stop. This is about my performance in my role. I think that's an incredibly courageous thing to say. I admire it.
And as a society, I'm hoping we get to that point.
Yeah, I think it's
We're getting
fascinating.
closer and closer every day, that's for sure. And
Yeah, we're all contributing. Listen, many women came before me to get me to here. And I hope that the 20-somethings in my company, when they're my age, it's just not a discussion point.
Yeah.
That would be great, right? Somebody asked me this recently. I was speaking on a panel or something, and they said, when do you think women, it was a bit of a man-hating thing, which I don't love. I just don't. But
I wasn't invited.
no, you weren't there. Weirdly, it was a room of women. This was a few years ago, and they said, "When will we have gotten there? Like, when will we know we're at the finish line?" And I said, "I guess when there's a conference of men saying, like a men's only conference saying, how do we get a seat at the table? I guess that's when it is. But I don't know that there's a finish line, right? Just when everybody's gender-wise has an equal opportunity. But I just think having more women in these roles that if you can see it, you can be it. What I love about the Fever this summer, what I loved about it was that there were young boys and college-age boys and men and coming to watch this women's team.
There you
and
go.
if you were a 5-year-old boy,
Yep.
you assume that the women play in front of a full house just like the Pacers do. You don't think it's any different now. That I loved about
yeah,
it.
that's awesome.
It normalized it. Yeah.
Mel, you're great.
You are great.
I'm so happy we talked to you. You're
Well,
fantastic.
thank you for having me on.
What a
It was
great
so fun.
contribution you're making. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker and Kristi Lee. If you like what you hear, please give a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best compliment. Thanks to our producers, Chris Spangle of Leaders and Legends, LLC. You can reach him at leadersandlegends.net. Also, thanks to Sophie Ritz. I'm Christopher Geisen. Thanks for joining us.